Okay, thank you. That was a very nice intro. Is this anybody's first BitDevs? Nice. How do you feel? You nervous? Are you excited? Expect to get called out within 10 seconds of showing up. Awesome. Yeah, so as Zach says, I wrote a book called The Bitcoin Miner's Almanac. As you can see here, to my Vanna White. It was started a couple of years ago because a lot of people were saying things and none of it made sense to me. A lot of people were saying that certain types of mining was going to save the world. They were saying that mining isn't profitable, nobody would do it. You're an idiot if you would do it. Some people were saying, oh, these miners are just reaping in tons of money. They're saying that we were going to destroy the network, that we were going to boil the oceans, that we were going to murder the whales, that we were going to save the whales, that we were going to save the ozone, that we might kill the ozone. And none of it made sense to me. So I put in a lot of effort and research and time into writing a book that attempts to kind of schematize what the hell is going on. What is happening in Bitcoin mining, and how do we understand this place as an industry, almost in the case of like the semiconductor industry in the 60s and 70s in the West Coast. Schematizing, okay, what is happening here, and why does the West Coast become the West Coast? Because you have all these engineers that are working on all this particular stuff that then go into software, and then San Francisco becomes what it is. And so the attempt here with the book is to try to aggregate and put some edges on what the heck is happening in this Bitcoin mining industry, and to do it in a way that makes sense. Because I don't like when things don't make sense. And I especially don't like when people say crazy stuff, which we are apt to do on Twitter. When people say crazy stuff about what Bitcoin mining is or isn't, and it confuses people, it confuses the layperson. So let's see if my clicker works. Nice. So we're not doing macro. And I have good reasons. I've been watching you guys on Twitter. I've been reading in your Telegram chats. And I'm disappointed. So we can't do macro anymore. And this is a lot of the thesis of the book. So we're going to start by kind of reviewing what the core, the nucleus of this book is. And then I'm going to take you a little bit into the extension, like the extended notes of what will eventually become the second version of this book. But for the time being, it's a very good book. You should buy it. It's the best book. It's the Bitcoin mining book. But we're not going to do macro. We're done. You're banished. Stratum v2. Has anybody heard of Stratum v2? It's going to save mining, as we've been told. It is the next generation protocol for pooled mining. It increases security, makes data transfers more efficient, reduces mining infrastructure requirements, introduces 3 new subprotocols, lets the miners select transaction sets, and improve decentralization. That's great. It's amazing. It's going to save all of us. The only problem is, who's read the Stratum v2 documents? Well, if you read them, you would see there were 4 deployments on how you could actually roll out Stratum v2, and only 2 of them actually solved the issue that you guys care about, which is decentralizing templates. So you're not allowed to do macro anymore. Who's heard of Ocean Pool? Amazing. For those on the camera, that was a lot of hands. Ocean Pool is going to save the whales. It's going to save the universe. It's going to decentralize mining. It's mining the way it should have been. Luke Dasher will personally show up to your house, and assuming all your pets are inside, he will congratulate you for mining on Ocean Pool, and you will do your little bit to make the world better. Oh, also Jack Dorsey endorses it, and he seems cool, so if he's on with that, you should probably be on with that. The only problem is, they just released their datum protocol. Who saw the launch of their datum protocols? Huge news. And it's good news. It's great stuff that they're doing. Essentially what they're doing, this is a diagram. If you're non-technical, forget about it. If you are technical, ASICs, datum gateway, full node, Bitcoin network. Not terribly incomprehensible, but fundamentally the division that you have here is that the miner is doing this cool thing where you're running your own nodes, you're running your own mempool, you're making your own block templates. We'll talk a little bit more about what that actually means. You can then actually achieve the difficulty target, get the proper proof of work, the hash, and be rewarded, and the datum protocol is going to reward you. It's magnificent. Except here's a problem. Steve Barber, Upstream Data. A miner choosing the block template on behalf of the pool of miners does not help decentralization because the regulator will still shut down the operator if they don't like the blocks being built. Which basically means, and to go backwards, I have to physically walk over here. It basically means you can do all this stuff. You can do all of it at home. But if the regulator doesn't like these guys, you're not getting your payout. You're not making any money. OK, so that doesn't solve our problem. You need to stop doing macro. Matt Corallo. Does anybody know who Matt Corallo is? Beautiful. That's great. He's a developer for that first thing I showed you, Stratum v2. Very, very smart guy. Pretty insulting that Ocean Mining confirmed in private that a major reason they built their own thing is they had some initial misconceptions of how Stratum v2 works. Whatever, it happens. And that datum is largely a somewhat simplified Stratum v2. Which it is. It is a somewhat simplified version of that first thing that I just showed you. So we can't do macro anymore. Ah, it went slightly off, guys.
Oh, no.
Let's see if I can do it on the leg. Can't do it on the leg. I gotta pull the tape off. I was being really, really pro with it. Boom. Tape back on. All right, next one. And I'm just gonna read this to you. This is from Swan's recent lawsuit that they have with some breakaway executive who has taken essentially their mining operations. A whole issue with Tether, this sort of internal corporate insanity that I'm sure will be unfolding very publicly over the next months or years. They say in the lawsuit, the filed lawsuit, a lawyer wrote this. A judge reads this. Framing. Takes a lot of years of school to become a lawyer, takes a lot of years of school and probably an election somewhere to become a judge. For this network to function, members must verify transactions, yada, yada, yada. Bitcoin incentivizes network members to verify transactions by holding a contest. This is Bitcoin mining we're talking about. To determine who wins the right to enter these transactions into the ledger and who has the chance to obtain new Bitcoin. We're doing a contest, guys. Each miner seeking to participate attempts to solve a puzzle on the network. It's a contest with a puzzle inside of it. Every 10 minutes, one miner is chosen at random. And that miner wins the right to record all Bitcoin transactions into the decentralized ledger that took place since the last contest. It's good. I don't have a comment on that one. That was my literal reaction. Was just the Alex Jones. So you've been banned from macro, okay? I don't want you to get excited about it. I don't want you to get like tickled when you see some drama on Twitter. You are hereby all banned from macro. I know you guys would never do it. You're very smart. You come to the BitDevs. You probably have a friend who is doing macro. Don't let them. It was always gerbils. A talk I gave about, I don't know how many months ago.
A year.
A year ago. About a year ago, as the book was kind of taking final shape, gave a presentation essentially reorienting us from the macro into the heart of what Bitcoin mining is, which is the machine. It's the machine. And I use the example of, okay, treat your Bitcoin miner, forget about Bitcoin, treat it as if it's just gerbils in shoeboxes with plugs coming out of it. You don't care what it does. It's gerbils in shoeboxes. I'm back to tell you it has always been gerbils. It's still gerbils. It's not working. That's all right. There we go. Maybe I got too far away. So let's actually talk about what the heck is going on. Who has seen a Bitcoin miner in real life? Amazing. Who has not seen a Bitcoin miner in real life? I don't want to Bitcoin mine shame you. Have you seen a photo of a Bitcoin miner?
Yes, of course.
Okay, beautiful. It's a machine. It's a machine that consists of 4 parts, fundamentally 4 parts. These are the 4 parts. You have fans. You have a way to cool. Doesn't have to be fans. It could be a water block with some glyphosated water running through it, some cooling water, the same way that you might cool your PC rig. It could be dielectric fluid. It could be immersion fluid, all this stuff that you hear about. They're dunking the machines in oil. It could be air, in the case of the fans. That's where you get the Bitcoin ASICs as being these cyber hornets that Saylor was talking about, this noise. And it can also be, Mara announced a number of months ago, It can also be two-phase cooling, which is a really interesting kind of cooling that I'm sure Tyler's super into for his heat reuse, that essentially uses solvent that the machine, when it heats up, it boils off this solvent from a liquid to a gas, and then that gets recirculated. Super sick. I am very excited about it, but I think it's also going to take a little bit to commercialize. That's not the point. Cooling. Cooling is step number one. Second piece. What is the second piece?
Power supply.
Yes. We're already not doing macro. I love it. What is a power supply? Why do we have to have a power supply? We don't have to have a power supply, but 99.9% of machines have power supplies. What does a power supply do? The plug that is in the walls around us, most of the electricity almost all the electricity that's being transmitted across the grid to us is transmitted in what form? Alternating current. And we have typically how many phases? Three-phase transmission. So when you look at those high-tension power lines that run along the highways, not necessarily the street power in your yard, but when you see the higher stuff, the bigger stuff, the metal ones, the big kind of derrick-looking things, you typically see sets of three wires, and that's because electricity is generally generated, or not generated, it is generally generated in three phases, but it's also transmitted in three phases, an A, a B, and a C phase. Why is that? There's a lot of reasons. We don't have time to get into that. But what's coming out of the wall is alternating current. It's AC. You can think of it like a sine wave. What is consumed by the machine is direct current. Flat line. And what the PSU has to do is it fundamentally takes that alternating current and it smooths out that curve into a flat line. And the way that it does that is it uses two things. It uses what's called a rectifier, and it uses capacitors. And so what it's doing is it's taking that very squiggly alternating current line and it is flattening it out so that it can go into the next thing, which is, say it with me, I love it, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that Denver is going to be so far ahead of everybody else when it comes to not doing macro. Into the hash board. Hash boards come in all shapes and sizes. They have as few as one chip in the case of the BitAxe. They can have hundreds of chips. And fundamentally, it is some sort of amalgamation of the ASIC, which is a malapropism, and an ASIC is an application-specific integrated circuit. What you have when you put all these together is a Bitcoin mining machine, but we call them ASICs, pissing off guys that are designing chips everywhere across the world. I see Jeremy being sad over there. This consumes direct current power. It's just the way it is. Aside from some guys that you see doing direct, like piezoelectric solar to chip, which there are some people doing that, they can get rid of this power supply unit. 99.9% of machines have a power supply unit. Power supply unit, also interesting. This little doohickey is a place where you also lose efficiency in the machine. So we always hear, oh, you have to have the most efficient machines. They have to be so powerful. They're going to be 15 joules per terahash. They're going to be 13 joules per terahash, which is kind of like your MPG rating, but for the machine, right? You want a lower one, you don't want a higher one. Basically, it means I put electricity in. If I put 10 watts in, I would like to get, say, 10 terahash. If I put 10 watts into this other machine and I get 20 terahash, it has a lower joules per terahash. That's good, because I want to make more money for what I put in, right? The hash board consumes direct current power. DC, I don't think I have anything else to say on that. Does anybody have any questions about that? Good.
It has to be DC, right?
Yes, as far as they're currently architected. And the last piece, does anybody know what the last piece is? The control board. I feel like we're doing the 101, we're doing the class, we're cruising, I love it. The control board, it's the brain of your machine. It holds what you see people referring to as the firmware, if they're going to update the firmware on the machine. LuxOS, brains, Vanish. Firmware is what we're talking about. It's essentially you're kind of swapping out the consciousness of the brain of the machine. You keep the same brain, you swap out the consciousness, you get different operating conditions, ways that you can run it faster, you can run it slower, you can run it in different ambient conditions, which we'll get into. 4 parts. Robert, does it always have to be like that? Does it always have to be 4 parts? No. There are other types of miners that will kind of trade parts. Avalon Miner will throw some interesting stuff on their hash board that's also on the control board. You can mix and match, but fundamentally, it kind of reduces to this. In the same way you might think of something like the camera, right? Like the modern digital camera. In the last 10 years, the modern digital camera hasn't really changed. The form factor has changed, but fundamentally, a camera can be reduced to a light type box, some kind of photosensitive medium, some kind of aperture, some kind of shutter, and that aperture can also be the lens. So it really reduces down to this core part. So these are the elements of our machine. When I put it together, I get this, which is sort of a weird rendering of a WhatsMiner non-existent model. And this is the thing that we call the Bitcoin miner. All right, we're nodding. I feel validated. We've made it. We made it a little bit further. You need 3 things to run it. We're just doing brass tacks now. 3 things. What are the 3 things you need to run a Bitcoin miner?
Electricity, power.
Power. OK, so electricity, power, same thing.
Cooling.
Cooling.
Internet.
I can't do 3, but yes. You need an internet connection. Your machine has to talk to the network eventually, typically to your pool or to your local subnet, your local network. It has to be powered. You have to get some kind of AC power into it, and you have to cool it. It doesn't matter how you do it, but you have to cool it. And if you can fulfill those 3 things, you too can run an ASIC. Or you could just buy an S9 from Kaboom Racks for $70 and just do it in your basement and drive your wife crazy. Ask me how I know. So what does Bitcoin mining do on the network? I should have asked before I put the slide up.
Settlement. Issuance.
Don't say security. I hate it so much. That's a troll. Especially because the last BitDevs was about how cryptography is what secures your keys, not hashing. Bitcoin mining does not secure the network. So it's out of those first 3 requirements, let's look at the first one. First one is the internet connection. The internet connection, you're connected to what? You're connected to the protocol. Essentially, you're doing 2 things on Bitcoin mining. You're helping with settlement. Settlement is what we're doing in the mempool. You sign your transaction, you submit it to the mempool. It gets scooped up into this block, this thing we call a block, and then it eventually gets mined, whatever the hell that means. It winds up on the blockchain, which is, I guess, the logical extension of that. We're using these words, but we're doing macro, and we can't be doing macro. And it's settled. And it's settled approximately every 10 minutes. Nod with me if it's approximately every 10 minutes. It's a self-adjusting system that every 2016 blocks, which is about every 2 weeks, the protocol adjusts itself with its trailing average to basically say, hey, I noticed blocks were coming in a little fast. Let's not do that. Changes the difficulty, makes it a little harder to find blocks. Or, hey, China just banned Bitcoin mining. Or actually, that would be the opposite. Things would be coming in slow. Or, hey, somebody just stood up 6 exahash. It's getting a little spicy. Blocks are coming in kind of fast. Let's make it harder. So you loosen or you can kind of control. It's like a thermostat that works both ways. But instead of doing temperature, we're doing time. Settlement. Issuance. What happens every 4 years?
Having party.
The halving party at the space. We're already getting ready. 2028 it'll be. Astounding. You all will obviously be there. Settlement, or issuance, sorry. Issuance, you receive a block reward. This is why we mine. We mine to make money, literally and figuratively. And I guess that's kind of the only ways to think about it. But if you have received Bitcoin or if you hold Bitcoin, there's only one way that it got to you. It came from a miner that sold that Bitcoin. There's no other way to get Bitcoin. You might think you get it from an exchange. I mean, you did. But somewhere down the line, that Bitcoin came through a block reward. And that block reward was sold or sent to somebody else or through some other transference mechanism that I'm sure you could do if you really wanted to go back into the history of your transactions. All your Bitcoin comes from mining. All of it, 100% of it. Which is crazy because we don't actually talk about that. It's obvious, but you don't think about it. Where do you get Bitcoin? Strike. Where do you get Bitcoin? The exchange. Like, no, you get Bitcoin from a miner. So what is mining? Mining is hashing. What is hashing? A cryptographic. Thank you for being honest. It's a cryptographic something. This is as technical as we're going to get, and it's an algorithm. What is an algorithm?
It's a puzzle.
It's a puzzle. It's a contest where every 10 minutes, one of us is chosen at random. This was the hardest thing to write in the book. It's the hardest thing to explain. I feel like I want to rewrite the whole thing, just because you're always trying to kind of rework what makes sense as you're trying to explain this to people, right? So we're going to go through it in a way that I think kind of makes sense, but I'm going to jump back and forth, and we're going to make sure that it makes sense. It's the way that I think about Bitcoin generally, and this specifically as well, is kind of like a mobile, right? Like you assemble a mobile, and a mobile sitting on the ground, or if you like these like beautiful Calder museum grade like mobiles, they kind of hang in these very kind of beautiful, precarious ways. You see them with like the hanging kind of extended heavy pieces and the little like tiny guy out on the side, and it's all kind of hanging there beautifully. That in my mind is kind of how Bitcoin works, where you kind of hack away and you ask some questions and you try to understand how these things work in practice, and at a certain point it just kind of hangs. But it's very hard to describe a Caldermobile. It's just a bunch of weird squishy blotches that you go and see at the Guggenheim every once in a while. And that's kind of the explanation that we're dancing around or trying to work through as we go into what the heck actually is hashing. What is happening on that internet connection into the machine? So we use SHA-256D actually. I don't know if you guys knew that, but we do it twice. We double it. Why? Because it was apparently an industry standard at the time. Is there anything deeper than that? I don't know. Throw your greatest conspiracy theories, just please don't do macro. What is it? I think about it like a wood chipper or like a meat grinder or like this big industrial square producing machine that I generated on AI. What does that mean? You put something in the top of the machine. It will always spit out in our SHA-256 machine. You put something in the top of the machine, it will always spit out a resulting block of the same size, 100% of the time. However, here's the catch. What you put in the top of the machine is in no way, shape going to resemble what you get on the other side. And once you have that thing that you're looking at on the other side, you are not going to be able to work backwards to the original thing that you had. So it's a wood chipper, it's a meat grinder, but imagine in a sense if we had a can of Diet Coke, right? I put a can of Diet Coke in the top of my SHA-256 meat grinder. It spits out an entirely unique cube. Say that this was data, so I could replicate it. I could replicate it without changing it, right? Obviously, the atoms in this are different from the atoms in your White Claw, right? If I can put the same atomic Diet Coke into the top of my SHA-256 machine, it will spit out the exact same block. That's what we call a hash. If I take this can of Diet Coke and I pull the tab off of it and I put it into the top of the SHA-256 machine, it will produce an entirely different hash, an entirely different block. It will be fundamentally unrecognizable. It will look nothing like my first block that I got out of putting my Diet Coke into the machine. And this is really powerful because what it allows me to do is I've created one-way mathematics. I've said that I can put something through this SHA-256 machine, data. So now let's say that I'm writing a love note to my wife. Dear Elsa, you're the greatest. I love you. Love, Robert. I put that into the machine. It's going to spit out an entirely unique hash. Entirely unique hash. If I send her that love note, and then I send her the hash, and I say, hey, here's a love note that I just sent you, and she runs it through the SHA-256 machine, what's she going to get on the other side? The exact same output, 100% deterministic. If you put the same thing in, you get the same thing out. But I can't take the thing I got out and work backwards to the thing I put in. It's one-way mathematics. If she gets it and she puts my love note into the SHA-256 wood chipper machine and she gets a different hash, she's going to go, I thought it was weird that you just sent me a list of like what to buy from Costco. It's not the same thing. Same data didn't go in. Something was tampered with along the way. So SHA-256 is really brilliant at stopping things from being tampered with. Stopping things from being tampered with. And this is kind of important. If I have a block of transactions, the whole reason why we're transacting over Bitcoin is because we think it's money. And the only reason we think it's money is because we think it can't be screwed with. Because if it could be screwed with, then it's not money anymore. I can just print more of it. But now we're talking about the things we already know, and we're going deep down this rabbit hole. Here's a hash. It is a nice hash. I just wanted to show it to you. If you go on to mempool.space, denver.mempool.space, sorry, you can find, oh geez, we'll put it in the YouTube notes. You can go to some instance of mempool and click on any block number, and if you look, there will always be something that looks like this. And it's gonna have a bunch of zeros in front of it. Huh, that's weird. Then it's gonna have a bunch of other random shit. And what we know about this is that this is the result, this is the proof. This is the thing that came out of the wood chipper. And that's kind of weird. It's got a lot of zeros in front of it. I thought you told me that if I put something in, I couldn't predict what came out. That's correct. I thought you told me if I changed anything that I put into my wood chipper machine, it would totally change what came out. That's also correct. Doesn't it seem very statistically unlikely that you would happen to have this hash that had all these zeros preceding it? Is very bizarre. Are you guys on the same wavelength with me? Oh, let's go there. Okay. More text, giant wall of text. They say it's really good to do this in presentations, is to provide you abstracts of the white paper. Okay. We propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer network. That's pretty sick. This is why we run nodes. Nodes are the decentralized protocol, right? However, side note, does Satoshi distinguish between mining and a node in the white paper? That's kind of cool. Kind of tells you that we may be in uncharted territory as an industry, that Satoshi, whoever they may be, was referring to these nodes as one CPU, one vote, and we're rocking the 4th generation of that one CPU, one vote, CPUs to GPUs to FPGAs to ASICs. So it tells you that we are way down the line of the consequences of the white paper, so we are very much in a place where we're having to figure it out. It was not kind of detailed to us in this kind of majestic way where all the things hang together as we look in the white paper. We propose a solution to a double spending problem. The network timestamps transactions. Cool, it's the time chain. Now that makes sense why people call it that. That seemed weird. By hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work. That's weird. Didn't you say that there was a proof of work with all that weird hash thing with all those zeros? I did. Thank you for remembering. Forming a record that cannot be changed. That's interesting. I wonder if it can't be changed because when we hash it, we're using this incredible one-way algorithm that does this one-way math thing, and that's probably why it can't be changed, because I know if I change one thing in the data, it's going to spit out a totally different hash. That hash will probably not be the thing that I actually need to submit to the nodes to actually be validated. Huh, that's interesting. Forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing the proof of work. Huh. We're not going to go into that's like 51% attacks and like orphan blocks and chain splits and stuff like that. That's for a later date. For those of you who have not seen mempool, this is how you normally see it. If there is a more beautiful representation of what's happening on Bitcoin, I don't know what it would be. I am a huge mempool.space fanboy. It's gorgeous, the data's incredible, and the price isn't anywhere. It just shows you the mechanics of what's happening underneath it. It's beautiful. And got to meet Wiz and Soft Simon a few months ago and tell them this, but as you may have experienced, you've ever talking to one of these like gigabrain autist dudes, they were appreciative, but not vibing in the same emotional way I was looking for. Also had a fun conversation, yeah, and we'll go into that later. Anyway, this is the blockchain, right? Who has seen something like this before? Amazing. And you say, oh, well, normally, okay, my transaction got mined into a block. I heard that little ching. Oh, it's beautiful. It's right there. I can see it. And if I click in, I can go find the transaction, and there's a bunch of weird stuff that I don't recognize, and 1s and 3s and BCs and Ps and whatevers. It doesn't make any sense to me, and like now there's all this like bizarre stuff if I actually go in and read the scripting languages, which I don't know how to, so I don't know why I'm doing that, but I do. However, what you're actually looking at is this. This is a blockchain. It's the hash of the previous block header. That's weird. That thing with all the zeros. Plus a Merkle root, which is really just a gigabrain way to say that we compacted all your transactions in a way that is very, very data efficient. Shout out to Ralph Merkle. And there's some other stuff there. And then there's all this hashing stuff that's happening. So pretend this doesn't exist. You have this. this is the mempool, what you see all the transactions coming in. There's this hashing thing that's happening. Something comes out of the one-way machine, and then, oh, shit, we got a line. OK, well, what do we do next? Well, we find the next one. OK, we got the previous block header. We got more transactions. Boys, let's get back to work. Time to hash. We're hashing, we're hashing, we're hashing, we're hashing. We're spitting out these weird bits of numbers, these hex hashes. Boom. Somebody gets one that just looks kind of right. The protocol says, yeah, this is cool. Nice job. We move to the next one. OK, so if you're looking at that, what you're actually looking at is this. The version of Bitcoin, previous block header hash. This is the thing that connects you to the prior block. That's it. That's the chain. That's the chain of the blockchain, guys. The Merkle root hash, that's the transactions. That's the mempool. The timestamp, n bits, which is essentially a way to say your target threshold, or what we also call difficulty. And then a nonce. Who's ever heard the, or flip it, who hasn't heard the word nonce? You've heard of it. Oh boy, you guys are lucky. A nonce. It's a portmanteau for number used only once. Remember, if I take data, static data, and for a moment we're going to pretend like it's all static data. Even though we know this is kind of changing because high fee stuff comes into the mempool, and so this is kind of updating every once in a while. This stuff can update. But let's assume that it's static. If I run just this data, static data, through my SHA-256 machine, it's going to spit out a hash. Congrats, we hashed it. Trivial. My old S9 can do tens of trillions of these every second. This is deterministic. This, I feel like I'm the meme. This, I add the nonce. It's a number used only once. Let's dig into that a little bit. What is this number? Yes. It's somewhere in the 2 to the 256th mathematical space. OK, well, that seems big. How big is that? All right. It's the equivalent of like winning the Powerball 7 or 8 times concurrently. Is big. Like you're not just out there with a flashlight, like picking the right nonce, so to speak. It is an immense, inconceivably large mathematical space that you are picking numbers from. If this is static and I put it through my machine, I'm always going to get a deterministic output. But I notice something very strange about the hashes that come on mempool, because they all kind of look like that. And that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. How could I get all of these zeros? It makes no freaking sense. These zeros are what we're talking about when we're talking about the difficulty target. So when you hear that difficulty is adjusted up or difficulty has adjusted down, and it's actually a little bit deeper than this because this is a representation of a more complex layer of programming. What you're looking at is an exponentially increasing difficulty, an exponentially harder thing to find. Essentially, I've taken that large mathematical space, and at the beginning, I might have said, if my difficulty was here, well, it's not so hard to do that. I mean, it's hard to do if you only have CPUs. It's not hard to do with modern ASICs. Every jump that I make is an order of magnitude increase in difficulty. That's very statistically low. There's no reason, there's no chance that out of randomness we would just happen to get all of these hashes that had all these zeros. We have to hunt for them. And the only way that we can hunt for them when this SHA-256 machine takes data and deterministically spits out something, but we can't guess the math the other way, there's only one way to do it. It's to guess. It's to guess the number. It's to pick a number, add it to that big chunk of data, run it through the SHA-256 algorithm, look at the resulting hash, and if that resulting hash is that really difficult to achieve statistical thing with all those zeros, then congrats, you have successfully found the proof of work. You've achieved the difficulty. That is immensely, immensely difficult to do. If you think about even the last generations of machines that were in like the around about hundreds of terahash. Terahash is how we count kind of the calculative ability of machines, right? A terahash is a trillion. So a 100 terahash machine is 100 trillion. And that's 100 trillion hashes, nonces, guessed, per second. That is an inconceivably large amount of, not compute, but processing power work being done. This is what's so freaking cool about proof of work, is that Satoshi figured out a way to take a computer and make it sweat, which is bizarre. It's so bizarre to think about, that you have a computer and you have to make it do something hard. I don't know, like export my Lightroom files. It kind of churns for a little bit. Well, if somebody built a computer that just did that, which you could do, it would do it like that. But Satoshi figured out a way how to take all this computer power and just make it grind, make it do something so immensely difficult, because the only strategy that you can pursue when you're trying to find a block from a game theoretic perspective, which is why this is so friggin' wild, is to guess. The only way to win the game of hashing is to guess. And the only way to be better at the game of hashing is to guess more with less energy, which is why we care about efficiency so much. So here's another conceptualization, another way that you can think about it, right? Who's ever seen those carnival games where you throw the rings and you try to get them on the top of the bottles, right? If you imagine my people standing around here are miners, right? And imagine that instead of a few hundred bottles, we have the SHA-256 search space, the sum of total nonces that I might put into my data, quote unquote static data, hash, and then get a resulting hash from. This is my search space. And anybody can come and go to the carnival as they like, and they can throw until their arm gets sore, as many as they want, as long as their arm is functioning, right? Some people are gonna get tired. Some people can only throw 10 of these every minute. Some people can throw 50 a minute. When I talk about difficulty, what I'm talking about, if you think about it in a physical space kind of way, if I turn off the lights and I change how many of these will actually hit the difficulty. If I turn off the lights, so now you can't even see where you're aiming. It's my one-way machine. The only strategy you can do is to throw as many as you can, as efficiently as you can, to try to get the right one. You throw, you check your work. Does it cling in the right kind of way? Does a little alarm bell go off and the guy gives you a giant stuffed bear? So if difficulty is very, very low, maybe half of this thing, that would be very, very low. Half of this thing, you can throw it, you get a ringer, cool, here's your stuffed bear. As difficulty gets higher, that space compresses. There are fewer places where you can achieve the proof of work. And the reason I want to make this distinction, okay, is because it's not a single place. It's a guessing game that gives you an outcome in a mathematical space where you get all those zeros in front. So don't think about it as this kind of, oh, I got the proof of work. No, you got a proof of work, and you achieved the difficulty that the network has told you that we're currently cranking at. When you hash, you're going to see a lot of crap like this. Does this achieve the proof of work? No. But 99.99999% of the work that any given machine will do will return this, or some form of this. Yeah. And can we work? I like that face. That was great. You're like, did he just put another slide with a bunch of Yes. I deleted a bunch, and then I just mashed the keyboard, and I hope nobody would notice the middles were the same. You're spitting out a lot of this. And what the protocol is doing is the protocol is saying, nah, buddy, the only way that you win the proof of work is if you achieve this target that we set. And this target is determined by the number of leading zeros, and eventually somebody's going to spit out something like this. And to find this is the equivalent of winning the Powerball 7 or 8 times in a row. That's very statistically unlikely. Am I ready to go to the next slide? Yeah, okay. So what's happening? You have a one-way SHA-256 machine. You have a bunch of information that's going into it. You have this iterative thing, almost like a random number generator, if you want to think about it in that way. It's the nonce, the number used only once. And you are spitting out something on the other side to hopefully get a bunch of zeros, because that is how we count the difficulty. And why do we do that? We do that because when we achieve the difficulty, honest nodes regulate miners in the short term and the long term. So to take it back to the beginning, settlement, you're at 10-minute blocks, is regulated via the difficulty adjustment. Every 2 weeks, the difficulty adjustment is going to happen. It's in the code. Every 2 weeks, you are going to see a trailing average of how quickly have blocks come in. If it's quicker than 10 minutes, the network is going to say, give me some zeros. If it's slower, the network is going to say, all right, take away some zeros. And in the long term, it controls issuance through the halving. Because every 210,000? You'll have to edit my voice to go low instead of up. In the 210,000 blocks, you get a halving approximately every 4 years. So this is what we mean when we say time chain. It's not actually indexed to a clock somewhere. It's a self-regulating mechanism, right? Actually, I don't know if that's true. It might have a clock index somewhere, but that's a Hunter question. That's not a me question. That's correct. My bad. It was in the prior slide. All right. That's what's happening over the internet cable. Everything else is way less stressful to explain. Second piece. We did the internet electrical plug. Tyler, would you read this out loud for me, please?
Energy does not equal electricity.
This is like a middle school science teacher's wet dream. Engineering 101 professor's absolute favorite thing to say. Energy is not the same as electricity. Energy is all around us. You have energy inside you right now. Your cells are producing energy. The food that you eat gives you energy. There's energy sitting in all those parking spots around here in the gas tanks of the vehicles. If you have a Tesla, there's energy in there too. Energy is abundant. We are on something that is glowing red hot with a molten core that is energetic on our tectonic plate level, and we are orbiting a sun that is constantly producing radiant energy. It's not the same thing as electricity. Bitcoin miners don't consume energy, they consume electricity. Where does it come from? It comes from, well, there's the picture, I'm not going to explain it. It comes from various sources. Is it distributed in the same places at the same times around the globe? Is it in the same abundance around the globe? No. Is it all the same in terms of difficulty to convert it to electricity? No. So this is really interesting. This is where we leave the cypherpunk world and where we start to get into the world of wildcatting, and we start to get into the world of entrepreneurship. Because now what we're talking about is no longer a system that is internally regulated through that internet connection. We're now talking about a system that is externally regulated. It is regulated by the physical world that we live within. Because we know that we need energy if we want to power a Bitcoin miner, and we know that that energy is not equally distributed or equally accessible, that some people have unfair access to it, some people have fair access to it. We're not all competing in the same levels. And so now what you have are physics problems, and you have business problems that you're trying to solve for. This is something that's so interesting to me, because in no way, shape, or form does this resemble anything that was detailed in the white paper. Like, even on the Bitcoin talk forums, you start to look at Satoshi's commentary about, like, well, theoretically, if I'm heating my room with a computer and you could scale this up, that is nothing compared to the stuff that's happening today. Not because Satoshi was dumb or was not, highly intelligent or intuitive about what these things could be. It's because they were entirely unimaginable. We have built this industry out of nothing. Out of nothing. The Bitcoin mining machine, the ASIC chip, was non-existent. It didn't exist. It wasn't a thing that did a thing. And now it's a multi-hundred million, if not multi-hundred billion dollar industry with publicly traded companies that are doing this all over the globe, which is absolutely bonkers. So we have this energy thing. We have ways of trying to capture that energy. These are actual photos from the books, or illustrations from the book. So if you like them, buy the book, look at the photos. That's a rendering of an offshore oil rig. That could be anywhere. That could be in the Gulf of Mexico. Very accessible, easy to get to. That's great. I have an unfair advantage. If I go to the Baltic Sea, a little bit harder. I'm off the coast of Alaska. I don't know, the population's not so big there. There's a ton of oil. You hear about the Alberta oil sands. You hear about these huge basins that they are discovering constantly. Yeah, it's great. It's tons of energy. There's also Psyche 16, which is estimated to be $10,000 quadrillion valued asteroid that is currently somewhere between Saturn and Jupiter. That's great. It's made out of gold. It's made out of nickel. Cool. It takes you 5 years to get there, 5 years to get back. Guess what it's worth? 0. Because you can't get it. It's too far away. It's too hard to get to. It has no market value. And even if we did figure out a way to get there, which, like, I don't know, Elon, maybe that's a thing you want to do, it's going to be 10 years before you finish the trip. Hydroelectric, another great example. Immense amounts of power, steady power, consistent power, some seasonal variations, but relatively, it can be good base load. Can I just put this anywhere? No. That's why there is a 14 gigawatt dam on the border of Paraguay and Brazil, the Itapu Dam. We'll get into that in a second. No, we can get into it now. That powers a small percentage of Brazil's needs, over 80% of what Paraguay needs, and they still have excess energy. They have way too much energy because they don't have enough demand for it. There's essentially 2 ways that you can get your electricity, right? And we've all heard about this, so let's try to orient around the stuff that's saving the world, the stuff that's the stuff that we're reading online, the stuff that we're seeing in the papers about what Bitcoin mining is going to do. We have Crusoe Energy locally that's doing a lot of this off-grid stuff. Upstream Data is doing it. A bunch of sort of companies doing this off-grid mining. They're going to save the whales. They're going to save the universe. You see, on the other hand, I have a bunch of containers that are sitting in front of a power plant. What do you mean? It's in front of a power plant. How can that be off-grid? There's this thing called behind the meter. So if I'm a power plant and I'm selling to the grid, you have to think in terms not of these like magnificent technological marvels. You have to think in terms of business. I have a power plant. Maybe that's a coal plant. Maybe it's a combined cycle natural gas plant. If I can make a product, electricity, from consuming something going in, whether it's coal or nuclear rods or natural gas, my incentive is to run my generator in a way that makes me money. And our grid, which we'll get into in the next slide, doesn't necessarily want to buy everything that you have to make. Off-grid, there are a lot of big off-grid deployments. TeraWolf is a good example. They're doing behind-the-meter stuff on a nuclear plant, I believe, in the Midwest. They can be really interesting customers to these guys because that electricity never hits the distribution grid that winds up in your homes. It's non-competitive. They're not competing with you. In some sense they are, in another sense they're absolutely not, which you can read about in the book when you start to look into capacity factors. I don't have time to get into it. I'm sorry. I would read the book to you. I am doing the audiobook right now, though, so if you like what you're hearing here, just know that I am currently recording the audiobook, which like may or may not intermittently have sounds of my wife cooking lunch in the background. It's a really good microphone. Off-grid, one example. And this is only a couple of many. There's many, many ways to be off-grid. You could set up solar panels in the middle of Wyoming, and you could be consuming the electricity on site, never connected to a grid. There's lots of sun there. But the sun, believe it or not, is not geographically distributed in the same kind of way, regardless of where you are. Turns out that we have different day lengths depending on how close you are to the equator. So there are better and worse places to actually go and get that electricity from the sun, or get that energy from the sun. On the other side, we have oil derricks. In hindsight, these were illustrated way too close. That looks ridiculous. If I need to get electricity from a source of energy, there is so much. Does anybody work in natural gas or like adjacent to energy in that way? Has anybody heard of natural gas? Thank you. I feel way more validated. Natural gas is almost a nuisance product at this point because it is so cheap. There's an immense abundance of it, and it often sits in these basins on top of the stuff that you want, on top of the actual oil. The only thing keeping you from getting rid of that natural gas, it's like a Coke can, right? But you have to get the gas out before you can get the oil. This poses a really unique problem because jurisdictionally, a lot of people don't like the oil and gas industry, believe it or not. And what they say is that, okay, well, you can't just vent that stuff into the air. It's actually really bad. It has immense methane emissions. That's what you're pumping out is methane. It's odorless, it's colorless, it's highly flammable, and it will murder you. So what do people do? They just vent it to the atmosphere because, like, bro, nobody can see it. Turns out satellites can see it. So jurisdictionally, this is something that's now being monitored as like an environmental risk, but you have to get rid of it to get the stuff that actually makes you the money, which is the oil underneath it. Enter the Bitcoin miner. It's not even reasonable to talk about oil and gas as like a single thing, right? Because you have everybody from Exxon to families in Oklahoma that have had, 20 wells pumping for the last 45 years, and that's somebody's like personal pension fund that they're just rocking as like, their family source of income. Charlie Spears has a chapter in the book that kind of goes into that. You should read about it. Am I doing well at sneaking in the? I'm trying hard. I'm in my grifter phase. This is my grifter phase. I have something to sell. I'm going to sell it. So this is an example of we have abundant energy that is not universally priced in the same way. The price is contingent on how easy it is to get, how easy it is to transmit it, how easy it is to turn it into something else. And so you have various kinds of generators that all have different business models, and off-grid is an awesome way to get access because we are location agnostic. We don't care. And the technology is getting a lot better in terms of our ability to say, run machines up in northern Alberta and run machines in Bhutan or run machines down in El Salvador, which are all very, very different environmental situations. Side note, are any of you guys gardeners? Are you familiar with Köppen climate zones? If you ever want to see something interesting about Bitcoin mines, correlate locations with Köppen climate zones because that actually gives you temperature and precipitation, which actually correlates really well to how screwed up your machines are going to be going into fall after a super humid summer. Ask me how I know. Don't ask me how I know because I'm still under NDA. Now we're going on the grid. On the grid consists of people that are generating electricity. There's loads of different ways to do that. We won't get into the various kinds of ways that you produce energy. Power plants, coal plants, nuclear plants. There's different kinds of load. They're managed by an operator. It is so confusing, and I very much took the easy way out in the book, which was giving you the high level. Because to actually go in and really understand the details about how what we call the grid operates is one of the most absurd amalgamations of not only really high-level engineering, but very, very complicated business models and very, very complicated governing structures. So you have this strange body of the people producing energy, the people transmitting the energy, the people that are doing the maintenance, who is paying for it, who is paying for what at what stage, who is regulating what. You have a federal agency that is supposed to be agnostic about who is able to interconnect and produce energy because their mandate is just to get it to you and to get it to you cheaply and consistently because you have to have it when you need the lights on. However, they really don't like coal, so there's some other stuff that they do. It is an absolute rat's nest. There's a really good book called Shorting the Grid by Meredith Angwin, who has worked in the space for ages. Even that is just an absolute beast to get through. It's a mess. Don't study it. If you do study it, I'm sorry, and I appreciate you. Enough on that. But on grid, there's an interesting difference between, you're making a great face at my duck.
Yeah.
Was that what you were making the face at? This is the duck curve. Does anybody know what the duck curve is? Nice. When I have a grid, is demand the same across that grid at all time? No. Great. When I have a grid, I have all these different generating assets. Are they all producing the same kind of energy at the same time? No. So my demand is different and my production is different. So a grid operator has the responsibility of keeping your lights on all the time. What's interesting about the grid is that we don't store energy on the grid. Energy has to be produced and consumed. Same time. Which is why you talk about maintaining the hertz or the frequency of your electrical grid. That's really important. Because when you start to get ebbs or flows in the hertz, the frequency of your electrical grid, it means that you are pulling more than you should be or you have less than you need. The duck curve. This is a visual representation of demand over the course of a 24-hour period. I had the illustrator put a duck in. I still don't think it looks like a duck. Slightly more, but their engineers are not artists. We'll forgive them. You do have, over the course of a given day, an increase in energy as people are, or electricity demand as people are waking up. You have kind of peak commuting times, and then you have people get to work. They're settling in for the day. They're doing something. Energy demand drops, or electricity demand drops. And then you have everybody getting home. I got to go pick up the kids. I got to go make some dinner. I'm turning on my electric oven. I'm getting home. I'm cranking the AC down. And then you have it kind of peak up, and then people start to go to bed normally. And it falls off into the evening. So this is a known phenomenon. This is how humanity in the macro consumes electricity on a grid. And the job of a grid operator is to make sure that there is always supply to match the demand. And they have a really interesting market mechanism that I discuss a bit in the book, but does get extremely complicated very quickly. It also gets very fragmented very quickly. It gets very hyper-local very quickly. In terms of physical infrastructure, the US is probably well considered to be kind of 3 grids, but we have in the teens of what are called ISOs or RTOs, regional transmission organizations, which are essentially amalgamations of regions that work to kind of maintain a particular location. So it's things like ERCOT, if you've heard of ERCOT in Texas, if you've heard of Southwest Power Pool, if you've heard of CAISO, which provides, essentially manages the grid in California, if you've heard of the Tennessee Valley Authority, if you've heard of PJM, these are all references to RTOs, ISOs, governing entities that have to essentially manage all the people who want to produce the electricity and make sure that everybody who is consuming it gets it. It's a mess. I kind of hate it, but we do go into it in the book, and it is actually really interesting, and it gives you a lot more appreciation for what the heck is happening, because if you bought a Tesla and you felt really good about yourself, you should feel bad about yourself, because over 50% of Colorado's grid is powered by coal and natural gas, so it technically burns more coal than my 2013 Tundra. No shade, though. I would get a Tesla. I think it's a very good commuting vehicle, and very safe if you have kids. So that's on-grid. Last piece, cooling. Oh, we're going. How are we feeling? We still engaged?
Yeah.
Good. There's nodding, but I'm just up here sweating in my Jerry Seinfeld phase. We've been watching a lot of Seinfeld at home. It's aged well. Okay, cooling. I'm going to talk about cooling in an interesting way. You can think of cooling at the level of the machine, and you can think of it at the level of the facility. Or you can think about it as the same thing. Because fundamentally, you have to solve for the same problems. Whether you're running one machine, you have to keep it cool. If you're running 10,000 machines, the way in which you might keep it cool will change. However, you still have to keep it cool. Your cooling or your facilities basically does 2 things. It protects the machine from the environment. The environment sucks. It's the worst. If we could run machines without the environment, things would be far better. It allows for the greatest operational range. What do I mean by that? The environment, it's the worst. It's always changing. Ambient conditions. Sometimes it rains. Sometimes it snows. Sometimes there's hurricanes. Sometimes I get dust storms. Sometimes I get wildfires. All of this has an impact on keeping my machines cool. All of it. Here are 2 examples. Left-hand side, and also I didn't mention it before, but every photo has the citation for the person, which you probably can't read, but I apologize. If you look at the notes, you'll see the person. They are getting credit. Left-hand side, this is a core scientific building, warehouse facility. Right-hand side, this is an upstream data hash generator. So this is interesting because it's a little different from our typical, what we think of as a container, because this actually has an engine inside of it. So you go up to a well, you drop it on that well site, you pour it into some excess natural gas. Your engine runs on natural gas. It's a gen set, so it's essentially, you could think of it like a small box Chevy engine that burns natural gas and produces electricity on the other end. And you can actually power ASICs off of it. Super sick technology. These 2 are very different, but they fundamentally do the same thing. They have to protect the machines from the ambient conditions and allow for the greatest operational range. So you're going to have changes. This is something that you could write a dissertation about. This is something that people are This is something people were very early on, frankly. Facilities design is immense. Companies have dumped hundreds of millions of dollars into designing facilities that fundamentally don't work from like a mechanical engineering standpoint. However, that doesn't mean we're idiots. We are a little Cro-Magnon. We are a bit of like, what is it, the Bill O'Reilly, like, F it, we'll do it live, is that his thing? That's kind of the industry still. So even though we have these giant publicly traded companies, recognize that everything that they have built in the last 5 years, that 5-year-old site that they built is worlds apart from the kind of stuff that they're doing now. They have to go back and basically renovate like this old house of their facilities to make these things come up to spec, because there are very basic like mechanical engineering principles that like people kind of forgot about when they were like, we've got 100 megawatts. Well, that's easy, just put them on racks and plug them in. And nobody thought like, what do we do when it gets cold out? Well, I don't know, the machines will just get cold. No, what do we do if we get like, it gets like really cold out and there's no energy, there's no electricity coming down the lines and we shut the machines off? Well, I don't know, they'll be fine. And a lot of people found out that when you do that, it is very, very not fine. Because what happens is that all those hash boards, which are ripping, doing trillions of calculations a second, they start to cool down. Now, what happens to metal when it contracts? Or when it cools? What happens to metal when it cools?
It contracts.
Nice, you guys are brilliant. It contracts. And then what happens when it sits in your facility at -20 for the better part of 36 hours, and then they tell you that you can turn the power back on?
Expands.
It expands. And what blows up first?
Power satellite.
You can say it. Have you ever dealt with a situation like that? It is not fun. It is very, very not fun. And it is a mistake that you will make once, and it will be very expensive. And you will then be hunting the machines that now are progressively degrading because they went through a very hard power on in a very cold environment. And you will find out maybe the next summer when the humidity peaks up and everything starts shorting out, or potentially next winter once everything that has been contracting and expanding has now collected dust and has gotten cold again. So your facility has to essentially do those two things. Are we there yet? No, we're not at these top-tier, beautiful AWS facilities. Will we get there? I think so. Something that I've been chewing on recently is I do think that we're going to quickly start to resemble standard data center practices. What that looks like, I can already kind of see it in the hydro space where we're using kind of standardized racking and we're starting to go through certain kinds of systems. It's just a little bit more of a nudge to start to get it really, really dialed in. And then we're far less likely to be blowing our stuff up. And if you read the Bitcoin Miners Almanac, which now you actually don't have to, you've just gotten the first part. But if you want more stories, if you're just dying to hear about the Atapu Dam, if you're just dying to hear about all this stranded energy that is in the wrong neighborhood, then I highly recommend purchasing a copy of the Bitcoin Miners Almanac. Now, here's the interesting thing. The second part of the book, at least my thesis when I was trying to synthesize things and make it coherent so people could understand it, was if we run through these three things that you need to run the machine, the internet, the electrical plug, and the cooling, it would become more intuitive to understand why people made certain choices when they were building certain kinds of facilities. So if I ask myself that original question again and I say, oh, off-grid mining is going to save the world, the first thing you should say is, well, how much energy is there? Well, I have to go to a well. Okay, you have to go to a well, so that means you're going to be like in the middle of nowhere. All right, so you're probably not going to build a mega mine. How much gas do you have? 12 MCF? Not a ton. Can I convert that into electricity? Yeah, run it into a genset. How much electricity does that make? Like 50 kilowatts. Oh, cool. How many machines is that? 12. Okay, does that scale? Not on that side, it doesn't. All right, so there might be some limitations to mining specifically on oil and gas. Okay, well, we're just going to go to the solar farms. Solar farms, they're all over Texas. They're producing so much energy. Let's go to the wind farms too. If you go to Southwest Power Pool, you go to the corner of Oklahoma, there are chunks of Oklahoma where electricity is priced negatively in excess of 25% of the year. Not to get into why that is the case, which is actually a really interesting case, it's negative. Dude, bring the miners in. Like, we'll take it. Give it to us, bro. Okay, how often does the sun shine? With seasonal variation? Okay. Do wind and solar kind of move in the same kind of way? It's kind of a follow and lead situation. But there's variations, right? You could have storms, you could have weather patterns and things like this. Is wind constant all the time? No. There's some great places just north of us in Wyoming. There's like amazing places for wind generation. And they have, well, CleanSpark just purchased a 75 megawatt site that was previously owned by a Chinese company that was then investigated and pushed out of the country for a deal that they did with some locals, where the locals were just kind of looking at the money, to be honest with you, and didn't really quite understand that you had to actually sign contracts with the Chinese, because the business practice is to just give or done, and when it's time, they're going to look who's on the title. And so one day these guys showed up and they said, hey, thank you for your services. It's been nice, but we're just going to run it in-house from now on. And then everybody discovered that that was pretty close to a nuclear military base in Cheyenne. So that got a lot of national attention, and it seemed like a very bad idea. So that kind of wound down, and now CleanSpark has purchased it, which is wonderful. Anyway, the point of the story is there's a lot of wind in Wyoming, and it can be consumed there too, by America's Bitcoin miner, CleanSpark. That was good. That was actually just a giant pitch for CleanSpark. All right, so now let's go to part two. This is the part that, are we feeling good on time? Can I tease you now with the second part? Yeah. So as I was saying before I jumped into this, right? This is what I'm essentially workshopping for version 2 of the book, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't get version 1, because version 1 is fabulous. It will be the most coherent and exciting thing you have read about Bitcoin mining, and potentially you can get it on an audiobook forthcoming. Don't know when, it's coming. I am like 60% of the way through the first section. The second half of the book is interviews of practitioners, people that are actually mining. And so the connection that I want you to have when you read the first section and you go, oh, it's just pieces and I put them together. Yeah, it's just pieces, you put them together. What are your constraints? Oh, it's just literally the physical world, and can I keep this stuff cool and run it? But I can't always run it because people don't always want to give me the electricity that I want. I might have to go somewhere to get it, but I might be limited by scale. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, we're just putting pieces together, guys. Let's go and talk to the people. Second part of the book is all interviews. Let's talk to people that are doing it. So interview some really interesting people. If you've heard of Econo Alchemist, is a huge privacy advocate, is now moved to the central US from actually Colorado area, the Intermountain West, huge privacy advocate. He has done a bunch of home mining, big advocate for home mining, specifically for the acquisition of no KYC sats. You talk to Kent from Saz Mining, current CEO of Saz Mining. They're doing some really interesting stuff, trying to do green mining, but it's hosting. It's a very interesting model that they're using, which is, if anybody has done hosting and is somebody that has set up a company that has done hosting and done it, hosting is the worst. Don't start up a hosting company. But if you do, just know it's the worst. You've been warned. How does the future of that model look? Who is the consumer? Who's the person who wants to acquire sats in this kind of way? How do they look at it? Because it's more of a financial model. Oftentimes it's kind of a debt vehicle, which is very bizarre. But we started getting calls from debt guys being like, hey, we want to host because we're kind of structured this. It's interesting. Talk to Jason Less, the CEO of Riot. How do you think about the finances or the access to electricity as a mega miner? It's different, but I want you to draw that connection between, okay, they're just playing with different pieces. They're just playing with different pieces, and it's not necessarily the case that one of them is the most profitable or the best business. Because the benefit that you get from having a larger operation in terms of terahash is that you're doing more work. You're doing more work. That doesn't mean that you're more profitable. Because if that work is really expensive to do, it's sometimes not worth it to do the work. When the price of electricity in ERCOT spikes up to 5,000, all the Bitcoin miners shut down because it's not worth it for them to do the work. So I want to get people out of this idea of one type of Bitcoin mining is going to be the type of Bitcoin mining, because it's not. And I want you to think of Bitcoin mining as the thermal firm, because fundamentally, what we're doing is the inverse of a power plant at scale. Instead of trying to generate electricity and then push it out to a grid for consumption, we're on the receiving end where we want to consume as much electricity as you can give us. However, we're a very unique customer. What we have to do is, if you're thinking in efficiency of generation, somebody's trying to take natural gas, they're trying to get it through a turbine, and they're trying to do it as efficiently as possible to produce electricity, right? There's going to be some efficiency loss. Us, on the other arm, are doing the same thing, but we're trying to do as efficiently as possible, consume that electricity and produce work. All right. This is Riot's Corsicana facility. It's giant. That is a 1.2 gigawatts of transformers, which is 1,200 megawatts. In Bitcoin mining, you have to have an edge. And we'll go a little bit quick because I don't want you guys to fall asleep and be sad and dying. You have to have an edge. Here's the new stuff. There are 3 ways that you can mine Bitcoin. This is what I'm positing. If you tell me at the end of this, or you beat me up in the parking lot and tell me I'm wrong, it will go into the book. There's ideological mining, there is business or utility mining, and there's state mining. And we'll go a little bit quicker. Ideological mining, who's seen a BitAxe? BitAxe is awesome. When I run a BitAxe, it's a single ASIC chip that I can run at home. What's my profitability? I don't care. I'm running a BitAxe. I'm decentralizing mining. What's my heat? Nah, 20 watts. Don't care. What's my total terahash? Nah, I don't care. I'm lottery mining. I'm decentralizing the network. I'm so great. Why would I do it? Because I want to decentralize. I want to participate in this cool open source thing, and I want to innovate around mining. I want some homies to talk engineering stuff with. Or I just want no KYC sats. That's why I ideologically mine. That's a model. That's a domain. What are the limitations? Can I be huge and do this? No. It's expensive. There's costs. I can't just do this. My total terahash is not going to be that high. And final, noise and heat. These suckers get hot and they get loud really fast. Next one. If you look at this photo, does anybody know what that is? It is the world's worst Bitcoin mine. If you know who this is, or if this is you, close your ears. This is apparently a 5 megawatt facility where instead of, this is also located in a city with a house right here. This is where your air goes in. This is 5 megawatts of machines. And that's a hole in the side of the building, and those are the S19s that you can see. And those machines are not on racks. They are stacked 3 high, and then there's a shelf, and then they're stacked 3 high again. So anybody who has ever done service doesn't like this. What's more is that there's a service space between these rafters and the wall. I heard from somebody who worked on the site that an electrician found out that something was not grounded while they were there. They lived. They're fine. But I just wanted to throw this in because I physically took this picture, and it's the ugliest Bitcoin mine I've ever seen. If it's you, I'm sorry. But that's a 5 megawatt site. Business mining. That's a business. It's in Wyoming. What's my edge? I can be profitable. I can make money. That's great. Who doesn't like to make money? I can be the buyer of first and last resort. We didn't get into that, but it basically means I'm the first person who wants to buy energy, and I'm the person who wants to buy energy when nobody wants to buy energy, which is a very strange place to be in the market. Heat. It's a risk for me. It's not what Tyler says, but it's a risk to me. Total terahash. I can get huge. I can produce so many petahash. I'm going to be balling. I'm going to be making so much money. Why would I do this? Because I want to run a business. Do I have to care about Bitcoin to mine as a business? No. A lot of these oil and gas guys couldn't care less about Bitcoin. All they care about is oil and gas, because natural gas can be a risk factor to them. It's not what they want to sell. They want the stuff underneath. I get BTC directly. I might have market makers call me up to get my Bitcoin. All the Bitcoin you have comes through a miner. And to provide a service to energy electricity companies. This is more of a new one. This is what you hear about with ancillary services, people shutting down, people supporting the grid, being good stewards of the grid. It basically means that I now become a hedge to the person operating the grid, which is new. It's a very interesting place to be. Natural limitations. These are pictures of Eric Hirschman's facilities in, I'm not sure if these ones are in Kenya, but I know he's in Kenya and outside of Kenya, a company called Gridless Compute. I can only get so big based on the power I have. I only have so much deployable capital. I have ambient environmental risk. Kenya is very different from Houston, is very different from Montana. And I have jurisdictional risks. Anyone who mined when Compass had the situation in Russia has experienced that directly. There's huge jurisdictional risks. Don't make that face at me, Neil. It was the first one that came to mind, I'm sorry. But to be fair, anyone could have wound up in that situation. That's the nature of jurisdictional risk. China, same position with jurisdictional risk. They banned mining. All that hash power flooded out. All the people who were running those facilities lost their money, or at least a large chunk of their money. Next one, utility mining. This is mining for heat. Tyler's already talked about this ad nauseum. Bitcoin miner exhaust heat is a product, not a problem. This is the Heat Punk Manifesto. If you've not read it yet, you should read it. It's great. Tyler wrote it. My profitability, it's often marginal or it's recovered. I'm recovering a sunk cost that I have. My heat, as I said, quoting Tyler, total terahash, it's limited by how much I need. If I'm trying to heat my hot tub, I don't need 20,000 watts. So there's a need aspect there. Why? Because I want to support a utility application. Why? Because I want to get rid of my sunk costs, and also because I like to be warm. It's a nice way to be as a human. What are the natural limitations? Need of the heat, the size limitations. There's outside industry competition. Turns out water heaters are not that expensive. It turns out replacing your water heater with this very convoluted Bitcoin miner setup is a hard sell, especially when you know your Aunt Denise just wants warm water and she doesn't really care about the magic internet money. It's a cool science experiment at this point. Does it have industry application? Yeah, 100%. Are we there yet? No, we're figuring it out right now. And then state mining. This is the one that maybe I'm a little bit more nervous about, but who knows if it's going to be a thing, who knows what it will look like. State mining is, and this is, these are the facilities in El Salvador. Profitability, well, it's state-owned. That's great. If I'm a dictator, guys, pull the power from the cities, put it in these Bitcoin mines. Heat, still, operational risk to be mitigated. Potentially, I could use it for my citizens if I'm a beneficial dictator. But potentially, I don't care, guys. Like, stand outside the ASICs and be warm. Like, that's what Siberia's like. Total terahash. Again, scale opportunity and consumer demand. Because, like, if I'm a state that's mining, I'm potentially competing with the consumer who needs electricity. So maybe, like, I don't know, just, like, turn the favelas off for a little bit and, like, we'll mine some more Bitcoin. I don't know, the sun is up, like, let's just send it around. There's opportunities for sketchiness. This is something that I would like to learn more about so that I don't feel so anxious thinking about state mining. But I do think well, first off, it's here. And second off, it's only going to continue to grow. Why mine? To utilize state energy resources. Yeah, if I'm Venezuela, I'm going to use the gas, especially if you're trying to, like, put me on an embargo and not let me use anybody else's money. If I can mess around with this Bitcoin thing and run a bunch of state-operated mines, that's kind of a cool thing to do. Russia has very big oil fields. To create jobs. Look at this great jobs program. We're doing all this training. We're like, I'm a great dictator. I made like 30% more jobs because everybody now works in the mines. The ASIC mines. And to escape the global financial regime. What are the natural limitations? Well, resources. Not all countries have the same access to resources. Not everybody's competent. I mean, if you've ever been to the DMV, imagine that, but it's a Bitcoin mine. Geopolitical response. I don't know, does Klaus Schwab get mad when you use your state resources for mining Bitcoin? Does the World Bank get mad? Geopolitical response. Citizen response. Do I have a civil war now because all of a sudden nobody has their lights on because we're just, bucking, mining Bitcoin and cruising around in our Maseratis? And the risk of tyranny, which is, I think it's a non-zero risk. I don't want to FUD it and go out and say the sky is falling and that states could do this. We're very excited about El Salvador. I have all the best hope and aspirations for them, and I think they're very, very competent. However, you shouldn't trust the state. It doesn't matter whose state it is. You shouldn't trust legally enforceable violence. So understand that there's a geopolitical moment. Understand that, like, yay, lots of people are rah-rah Bukele, and he's a smart dude. He's well-spoken. He's doing what's right, or he's doing what he believes to be right for his country, and he's building this really powerhouse of a country that none of y'all would have thought to visit, 7 years ago, but now we all want to go and check out and go surfing and have some fun in. But understand that there's a non-zero risk that if you like the political party in power, just imagine the worst person you know now in power with the access to the same tools. Because in a long enough timeline, eventually somebody that you hate will have access to those tools. So there's a non-zero risk of tyranny. These pictures right here are not just random pictures. These are as verifiable as I could get. Pictures of, does anybody actually know?
Bukele's house.
Bukele's house. It's a Bitcoin mine that is not in El Salvador. Bhutan. They recently had their thing coming out that they were stacking all this Bitcoin. They were generating all this Bitcoin. Cool. Somebody actually did that thing where you can like pay to get a satellite to point somewhere, and so that's how we get the picture on the bottom left, not this beautiful one in the trees. Anyway, to summarize it, buy my book. No, just kidding. To summarize it, stop doing macro. I understand there was like a natural urge to like TA and think boy and get very excited. And in a lot of sense, it's very valuable. You need people gaming out the possibilities. This is what makes a lot of the early developers and early programmers so powerful, is that they are gaming out all these really interesting situations, and they are essentially designing in their heads and by word of mouth or by message board what will work and what will not work. Understand that that's not what we're doing in Bitcoin mining. It's not. Our constraint is not, let's push the code and see if it works. We have a version of that. It's called be an entrepreneur, lose a ton of money. We have a naturally cleansing capitalistic mechanism, not universally, because obviously people are mining all over the world, but we have a mechanism via entrepreneurship and free market capitalism, and even not free markets, where mining is playing an important role. And so I want you to think about it in the context from the smallest unit, from the machine. Think about it from the three things that machine needs, and understand that the operators are only solving for those three things. All they're doing is solving for internet, electricity, and cooling. And I hope it gives you more of a sense to see what is going to pop up in the news over the next months or years, and actually be able to contextualize it and to understand, is this a real thing? Is it FUD? Does it sound a little bit nonsensical, so that you can have kind of a better sense of what's happening in the mining space? Thanks.